Since I've been 12 years old, Evangelion has been an important part of my life, and I would actually call myself a massive fan. My apartment room is literally filled with Eva merch and figures, and friends constantly make jokes how finding presents for me is not difficult since I take actually everything Eva related. Watching Neon Genesis Evangelion for the first time has changed my life in several ways, and it has become my favorite piece of media ever, and that hasn't changed for 8 years. While I haven't waited as long as people who saw the reboot movies at their release, I still had to endure a time of 7 years to finally witness the conclusion to this grand franchise. Seeing it the first time left me shocked, wondering and unsure. But now that I've seen 3.0 plus 1.0 thrice upon a time again, I found my opinion on the movie. And since my first big video on Evangelion, why 3.33 is in my opinion an underrated gem, got a lot of attention lately and very nice appraisal, I decided to also do a video on 3.0 plus 1.0. Also because several people asked for that in the comment section. But unlike my video on 3.33, this video doesn't come from a place of pure admiration and the intention to express pure love. 4.0 is still a very new experience to me, and thus this essay will be more of a straight-lined assignment and breakdown of the movie with my opinion and feelings mixed into it. But since it's the finale to all of Evangelion, it's no less important to me and I will put my heart into it as well. Each section will focus on one part of the movie and one character. But sadly, the movie doesn't offer the same amount of attention and conclusion to every character in the franchise that is beloved to me, and thus people like Ritsuko, Kaji, Misato, Kaoru, Fuyutsuki and others won't get a lot of remarks. But that doesn't mean that I don't like these characters. Some might have been discussed in a different video like Kaoru, or will be discussed in a future video. So, enjoy this second project on Evangelion from me, and let me and others know in the comment section what you think about it. As with my essay on 3.33, and I will from this point on call the movies with their 0.0 names again because it's just easier, I will start with the opening scene with a bit focus on Mari. Just like the other reboots minus 1.0, 3.0 plus 1.0 starts with an action set piece featuring Mari. It becomes immediately apparent that 4.0 takes on a drastically different tone in visuals, music and atmosphere than its very dark and gloomy predecessor, even though it takes place in the same post-apocalyptic and lifeless world. Everything seems just brighter. While the art style is similar to the other rebuilds, it feels at times a bit lesser impressive, but it's still very breathtaking. The music is again composed by mastermind Shiro Sagisu and thus a joy to listen to, but this time it feels less coherent. Sagisu found a certain style for 1.0, 2.0 and even more 3.0 that just carried the tone of the movies perfectly, but in 3.0 plus 1.0 I sometimes feel like the soundtrack is less coherent and sometimes unfitting while being a great choice at other times. It also sadly features less tracks with the choir and an epic field that are present throughout 2.0 and 3.0 and other soundtracks like Bleach or Berserk. Some tracks even sound nothing like something I would have expected in Evangelion, like several Life is Strange like English acoustic vocal tracks. Don't get me wrong, all tracks are very far from being bad, but I'm unsure if they fit their respective scenes. The soundtrack in general is much more hopeful and epic, but that is also true for the general tone of the movie, and there are great instances of reuse of original NGE tracks that I haven't heard since the end of Evangelion being arranged, which really made me happy. With my opinion on music and visuals stated, I will now nearly completely focus on story, characters and events. The first thing that was very endearing to me when 3.0 plus 1.0 started was that for the first time really a major scene takes place in a different country than Japan, with Paris. It's also completely drenched in the red Albaria, which is expanded on in this movie while being hinted to since 2.0. We now see that normal humans can't survive in the red wasteland because all the Wille members have to wear plug suits. While being fitting for all of the fighting scenes in this movie, it's completely over the top action, with Nerv now deploying a whole army of Mark Evangelions. While being over the top, this actually expands on 3.0's scene, where you can see that these exact same Evas are being manufactured in the broken Nerv HQ. As I already mentioned, Mari Makinami is the center of the opening scene, and this time she seems much more serious than before, though she mixes some of her own humor still into it. I would really like to say a lot more about Mari, but nothing really changed from the other two movies in regards to the fact that she doesn't bring anything outstanding or important to say to the table. This especially saddens me in relation to the movie's ending, since a bit more character development could have saved her for me, but that will be addressed when I talk about the movie ending. The only other things I have to say are that Mari is saying that she will find Shinji after she won the fight in the opening is a nice foreshadowing to the ending, and that it's pretty much revealed through a scene with her and Fuyutsuki that Mari truly was a colleague of Gendo and Yui with a different name back then. How she de-aged into a 14-year-old girl and why she is focused on Shinji when she must have known him since he was a baby is still a very weird riddle to me though. The next part I will be talking about takes nearly half of the film's length and is at the same time my least favorite part and an inclusion I love. This part will focus on the village and the character of Rei. If I wouldn't have been spoiled about this part through the trailers, I would have definitely been shocked to see that there are human settlements left in the Albaria world. And Kensuke, Hikari and Toji having survived was such a great twist as well. They all have evolved into very respectful people, caring and working for others, and they have really grown from their teenage personalities. Toji being married to Hikari is also a very cool detail for fans of the original and the manga. The tranquility of the village life gives such a heartwarming feeling, and is a nice contrast to the lifeless apocalyptic world. With Credit we now get the last of Evangelion German named institutions, and seeing penguins of Pan-Pan's race again made me really genuinely happy. Seeing everyone caring for each other was really nice, especially seeing Kensuke caring for Asuka, since the Iron Maiden manga spin-off hints at the fact that Kensuke might like Asuka a lot. And him talking about his father was a cool way of foreshadowing Shinji's talk with Gendo later. But I have a lot to criticize about this part as well. In my opinion, the pacing in this part is all over the place. I like that such a major part of the movie featured only quiet scenes and character interactions, but it didn't need to be set in the village only. They missed the chance to have more interactions between Shinji and Mari or Misato on the Wonder ship especially. Other than that, fanservice began to be way too high from here on throughout the whole movie. And Kensuke explaining to Shinji that the Nier Third Impact wasn't as bad because it brought good things with it, to Shinji seemed like utter nonsense considering all the deaths and pain surrounding it. It feels like he just said that to please Shinji. I actually have more problems with Shinji in this section, but I will focus on that later when I talk about him in general. Kaji and Misato having a child was a really cool thing, but they missed the opportunity to show actual interactions between him and Shinji. But my most complaints go to the center character of this section, Rei 3. This iteration of Rei has all of a sudden a completely different character to her version in 3.0, while being the same Rei version. While 3.0 ended with Rei still having a cold stoic look, she immediately is more of a curious and friendly character in 3.0 plus 1.0, rather than unemotional. And since this movie takes off right after 3.0, it makes no sense for her to have changed so drastically from the get-go. I do admit that she is very cute, and her interactions with the world and the village are as well. I like her development, but that curiosity and those interactions are way too overused in this section. And while the revelation that every Rei is actually programmed to feel affection for Shinji is shocking and fitting, her death isn't delivered as well to me as Anno might have hoped. While being unexpected and also fitting, it is not well done in relation to Shinji's reaction. Shinji spent the most part of this whole movie with trauma from Kaoru's death. Only seeing the DNS choker on Asuka made him puke. But seeing Rei die the exact same as Kaoru didn't trigger his PTSD again, but made him determined instead. That is just illogical and not how PTSD works. But still, I can't deny all the beautiful things the Village section has done for the Eva fans when I look back on it. In this section I will focus on the main part of the second half of the movie, meaning the Wunder ship part and beginning of Wille's battle against Nerv. Asuka will be analyzed in the process of that because this is beside Misato mainly her battle. This part essentially begins with Toji's sister Sakura crying over Shinji and slapping him for no real reason. She acts like she would have known Shinji forever and be mad in love with him when she only spent about a day with him in 3.0. Asuka fittingly mentions that by asking her if she was his wife. The few interactions between the Wille members, especially Hyuga and Aoba, were very nice, but other than that, the Wunder ship battle part is the most boring part in my opinion again. I think it's even worse than 3.0's, which I actually like because of the music and the epic feeling. A big reason also is that it's really unclear what and especially where it's happening. That is because the battle happens beneath the epicenter of second impact, where the L barrier resides, which essentially means underwater. But people can just walk and breathe in that area normally. I also don't really get why the Nerv HQ can fly, but I assume it's because Gendo is having inserted the key of Nebuchadnezzar into himself, and he's just wanting that. But before I continue to talk about the battle and such, I want to mention that the idea of Kaji sending a sample of every Earth life form into space and saving it is very melancholic and resembles Yui's action in the end of Evangelion of preserving humanity's image for eternity. While talking about Kaji, my biggest question is how and why Kaoru started the third impact instead of Shinji, and what Kaji actually did to stop that. But Anno actually has hinted at the fact that very much in the time skip is still unclear and could be someday adapted. But at least 3.0 plus 1.0 actually proves the theory I've talked about in my video about 3.0, of 4 atoms existing in the rebuilds. Though Unit 13 and 1 aren't actually atom vessels, but Mach 9 to 12, which bears the question why those 2 units are so powerful. While having a similar premise and concept, the rebuild's instrumentality is also a bit different to the end of Evangelion and NGE's. In EOE, every human is connected by merging their consciousnesses into Lilith as one, but here it's supposed to happen by making every human into a Mach 7 Eva and then combining them all. Talking about the Mach 7, I kind of feel weird looking at them with their human skulls, since every other Eva, while having a human stature, always had inhuman heads and eye forms. I also don't really get how they can act on their own. Do they have a dummy plug inserted like the mass production Evas? Probably. The battle scene of Asuka and Mari fighting against those units in Mars looks really stunning, but together with Unit 2's transformation scene, it's again very over the top. An interesting fact that was mentioned was that Misato's father was the creator of the plan for human instrumentality. And it's actually nice to see the epicenter of Second Impact up close for the first time, with being a wormhole into a fourth dimension that might be in the center of the whole Eva multiverse, but more on that later. And one thing that was known since NGE but never fully explained finally got its official reveal: the situation that only humans or angels can survive on Earth because they are two different offspring life forms of Lilith and the Adams, and thus have to fight each other. By combining humans with angels in form of Evangelions, the humans or Lilin are then advanced into a higher form of existence, which really essentially is human instrumentality. It's actually funny how many things are really well explained or revealed in this part of the movie, but on the other hand the same amount of questions comes up. Misato and Shinji hugging before she takes off is a really cute goodbye scene, but more on that later when I talk about Shinji. Now I wanna focus on Asuka first. Probably the most outstanding thing is the revelation that Asuka Shikinami of the Rebuilds is actually, like Rei, a clone, and at one point there were many different Asukas. Though I don't really understand why Soryu, or the original Asuka, exists inside of Unit 13. That also explains why Asuka never had the same character development in the Rebuilds and a different psychological problem. Since she never had parents that could leave her, she became a much more stoic and determined personality. While I completely prefer the original Asuka, it's nice to have such an explanation. Another revelation and another proof of a popular fan theory came when Asuka awakened Bardiel's power, and thus confirmed that she became sort of an angel after 2.0's infection, which many fans speculated on due to her calling others Lilin and blue lights flickering underneath her eye patch. Thus her transformation into an angel kaiju was over the top, but logical in context. Two other things I want to mention are that it was nice to see how she expressed her affection for Shinji by ranting and picking on him during the village part, and showing that she still cares for him. She even admits that she loved him once, which is a nice callback to the relationship in NGE, and supported by the scene resembling the ending section of End of Evangelion on the beach. But her going with Kensuke and probably being in a relationship with him is a nice unexpected change, but fits the overall theme of the movie, which I'll talk about later, and the fact that she is a different Asuka altogether. Now we will dive into my favorite section of 3.0 plus 1.0, and the most complicated but rewarding part for every Eva fan. And this part will focus on a character I never thought he would be my favorite part of a movie: Gendo Ikari. With the introduction of the Anti-Universe, or also called minor space, Eva now also steps into the field of physics theory, of antimatter and positive matter, and how our universe's structure can exist like it does while having already dealt with psychology, mathematics, religion and politics. But let me explain first. To begin with, I'm going to quote Evangelion's fandom explanation on it. The minor space is the space which Gendo Ikari describes as the realm of gods, where physical laws do not apply, and is where Evangelion imaginary and the Golgotha object exist. Human senses aren't able to perceive it, so the SAL present creates a virtual environment for the minds of those inside to see, comprised of their memories. Seemingly only Adam or beings with Adam-like powers can travel inside the minor space. Unit 1, Evangelion 13 and Mari's Unit 8, given part of the vessels of Adam's power, are the only Evangelion units to go inside. While sounding like another sci-fi concept, the Anti-Universe actually refers to a real-life theory. Our existence depends on matter, because everything we know is essentially matter. But for everything positive there is a negative, and so antimatter does exist. but like with protons and neutrons, matter particles and antimatter particles should exist in the same amount. But that is not the case in our world. In the contrary, antimatter seems to exist less and less, but where are they going? That's where the anti-universe comes in. While matter moves forward in time, which is the reason why we perceive time like we do, antimatter moves back in time. So it's speculated that there is a universe moving backwards in time behind the zero border of our universe, at the point where time started. This means that the Big Bang created two universes moving in opposite directions. This is what the minor space represents, a realm that can't be entered by humans, and that is the center of the universe, or rather multiverse. This might also mean that the anti-universe is the center in each Eva timeline, and the exact same place, and when entering it you could essentially go to a different timeline. Golgotha, being the center of the multiverse, seems to be the place where every Eva timeline diverges from. So in some form the rebuilt universe is actually the original, or at least the object should have existed in Antarctica and NGE as well. This is why things of NGE are shown in this realm, and a great idea how to explain the connection between rebuilds, NGE and the other cycles of the time loop. Kaoru later mentioning that he always keeps his memories when being resurrected many times, then finally proves the biggest theory in Evangelion, the time loop theory. That everything is a repetition of each other, with each new iteration of the Eva universe. But the meta-narrative of this part of the movie just begins here. At first I hated how awfully the fight between Mark 13 and Unit 1 was animated, but once I understood that it was meant to represent that all of this is only happening because of Gendo and Shinji's memories produced by the Anti-Universe, it was a cool set piece. And the fight happening at many familiar places is a nice callback. A scene especially stunning was this one. One other thing I hated at first, but started to appreciate in connection with the movie's theme of humans being able to make their own decisions and resisting fate, was that the AAA Wunder could make a new godly lance. But that is because it's a vessel of Adam first, and secondly, it's just an expression how hope can create wonders and how humans can overcome fate by their own decisions. Eva 8 eating all the Adam vessels and thus becoming able to enter the Anti-Universe and essentially becomes Adam himself was a neat idea and gives Mari at least some importance. But continuing with the meta concept, the biggest mind F might be Evangelion Imaginary. It takes into account that NGE and the whole franchise is just fiction, and that through the Anti-Universe Gendo and Shinji can see exactly that, and thus can imagine a real world. The Black Lilith then awakening is a really nice callback to the end of Evangelion, but its combination of humanoid photorealistic design and drawn part looks very unpleasant to me, and even though I understand that it's supposed to represent the connection of fiction and reality, it's still unpleasant. The man who is responsible for the instrumentality in its entirety this time is Gendo Ikari. While I always loved him as an antagonist, I never really appreciated his character as much as the other in NGE, because his psyche and backstory was never as fleshed out, and his conclusion was rather kept small in previous endings. I never thought that I needed more than that, but 3.0 plus 1.0 proved me wrong. Gendo's inner psyche scene is maybe the only thing missing from NGE, with all other mentally troubled characters getting their spotlight, and it's so amazing to finally get that. What also stood out for me was that this time a psychological scene wasn't shortened for the rebuild's more action-focused attempt, like many scenes in 2.0 that felt like bootleg versions of the ones of NGE. But before I talk more about the new things about Gendo in this film, there are 3 things which are callbacks to NGE, which I really like. First of all, Ritsuko shooting Gendo and finally hitting him was a nice parallel to the end of Evangelion. Gendo inserting himself the key of Nebuchadnezzar is very similar to inserting Adam, though without Rei, he actually keeps his godly powers this time. The revelation that he does all that for his wife Yui shows that he still has the same goal as before for causing all this calamity. Completely new is the idea of an adult controlling an Evangelion, and that being Gendo of all people. But what really is great is that this creates a true final conflict between Shinji and his father as a protagonist and antagonist, which the original never had. This way, the ending is a very much more conventional one than the one of the end of Evangelion or NGE, with no real antagonist, but it works perfectly to close the chapter of father versus son. And this time, Gendo being the conductor of instrumentality instead of Shinji, and him fighting against that was very interesting. Finally, Gendo leaving the train at the end of his psyche scene and accepting that he treated Shinji wrong is a nice conclusion. Even though he still is a psychopath and a mass murderer, and that doesn't justify anything he did. But nonetheless, his complete arc in this movie was a joy to watch. Now that we have come to the finale of the finale, let us talk about the last concluding ending to this great franchise and let the loop finally end. Every major character gets their dedicated farewell, which was just so satisfying and heartwarming. The only exception are Ritsuko and Misato, sadly, but that might be because Shinji wished them goodbye before the whole impact. Everyone else gets such a scene and a person very unexpected to have and go with. Asuka going with Kensuke, Shinji with Mari and Kaoru with Kaji was unexpected, but in the end a great parallel to the fact that people grow over time and develop new relationships over time passing that might not be the first to think of, but maybe the healthiest. Though Kaoru admitting that he did all the things for Shinji to make himself happy was kind of a downer, because I always admired him for being the only one loving Shinji in a healthy way. While the characters and their psyche and relationships to each other was what always made me love this series over everything else, I can't deny that the mechs and their designs weren't a great part for me. I mean, I have a figurine for nearly every Eva unit in my apartment. Because of that, I really appreciated the scene of Eva Unit 13 piercing Unit 1 and then every Eva unit after that. This together with Shinji wishing goodbye to all Evangelions was in universe as well as meta, because Anno wishes goodbye to his beloved franchise through this phrase, and Shinji to the harsh world where Evas and angels fight. But before I go on talking about the finale itself, I want to bring the main character of the multiverse to the center one last time, Shinji Ikari. Though we're actually at the end of the movie, to fully understand how I feel about Shinji's role in 3.0 plus 1.0, I need to start at the very beginning of the movie. Since it took off immediately after 3.0, Shinji was logically still in a broken state after Kaoru's death. So much that he says no word for nearly 45 minutes of the film. But his mental state turns positive way too quick and way too easily. Don't get me wrong, I really like him being the hero he deserves to be for the final and being cleansed of all trauma, but it happens without reasonable explanation. I would have loved to see an End of Evangelion or episode 36 part with psychological elements of Shinji realizing he can be happy and then becoming the character he is for the second half of 4.0. But instead, Shinji being treated nice is a nice nod to the fact that everyone can be loved, but for the context of the movie it makes not much sense, since before everyone blamed him. But my and of many fans' theory that Shinji couldn't have triggered the third impact is proven, but provokes the question why everyone blamed him in the first place in 3.0 instead of Kaoru. It's not only illogical, but also makes Kaoru's character change to a negative one because of him being the reason for third impact. This leads to my next point. Shinji actively fighting against instrumentality instead of just living through it is a nice change and really deserved as a finale for this mentally troubled character. And after being somewhat healed of his ill mentality in NGE and End of Evangelion, now working as the therapist for Gendo, his father, is a very nice parallel and a great ending for their relationship. But it makes little to no sense in the reboot continuity, where Shinji technically hasn't have his inner conflict in the impact. Though if you see it like every incarnation of Shinji coming together in the Anti-Universe, because it's in the center of the multiverse, you can at least look over that. Shinji then conducting the Neon Genesis is very cheesy, but in a good way, creating finally a happy ending for everyone, which really hit the mark for me as a fan of every one of the cast. While the instance that Evangelion in its original was much more gritty and realistic than most other anime, and thus tried to teach the viewer that it's no solution to live on lives by escapism, I really appreciate a finale that is happy for everyone because of my love for them. While this finale misses the chance to have great character psyche moments for Shinji, Misato and Asuka like NGE, the conclusion to these characters are very satisfying if you take their aspects from the original in. I really get what Anno wants to express with this finale. His original work was a reflection of his mental state back then, and while that makes it so great because it's so brutally honest, he is a happier man now. He had his fair share of problems, but he managed to conquer them and became happy. So happy in fact that he wanted a good ending for his characters. And I think that is exactly what he wanted any Eva fan to feel. Even if they are having awful times someday, they can become happy. Because of that, Shinji and the others being in the real world after the reset is such a great way to tell everyone like me, who connects so much to the franchise and learn from it, that it's time to take off to the real world and live through reality. The only and last controversial thing is concerning Mari and Shinji being together. It shocked me the first time I saw the film. It came unexpected and seemed unreasonable for me. But once I got that, it means that sometimes relationships form unexpectedly and everyone has to move on from their connections of decades ago that maybe were unhealthy. I really liked it. The only thing that I would have definitely changed would have been to have Shinji and Mari having more connection scenes beforehand, like Shinji and Kaoru in 3.0, to explain their final togetherness. Still, I cried the second time I saw the film, because it puts a final button on a book that accompanied me through all my teenage life, from 12 to 20. I learned so much about myself through Evangelion. I learned to accept myself, how other people can suffer in completely different ways as well, and how we can only try to accept and understand each other to be happy. I learned that it sometimes needs suffering to accomplish something really good, and that being able to be heard also means being able to be loved and love others. And this finale taught me to take all these things I learned and more, and take them into the real world and my own personal life to make something great out of it. Evangelion, as one of our most important things to us, may have ended, but we don't need to be sad about that. We should be happy it happened, and cherish those memories. Thank you all so much for your support. I always wanted to make YouTube videos and express my feelings for things I love and influence people through it. And all of you have shown me so much awesome appreciation on my first video on 3.0. I couldn't believe it would really happen. I had the feeling many viewers generally felt touched by that video, also through so many comments and discussions. I hope I hit the same spot with this video, so that you will again tell me what you think about Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 Thrice Upon a Time, as the finale to the Eva franchise. In addition, I also want to announce that I will make a video on Evangelion 2.22 if this video gets enough recognition, which means about 3000 views and 100 likes. If you want to see that being done by me, I would appreciate you sharing this video, liking it and subscribing to my channel for Eva content and other gaming, anime or film related videos. Thank you very much. Sayonara.